In 1745, Hannah Snell was abandoned by her husband when she was with child. After giving birth to a daughter who didn't live long, the injured woman hatched a plan to go after her good-for-nothing man. Or so the story goes.
As she was now free from all the ties arising from nature and consanguinity, she thought herself privileged to roam in quest of the man who, without reason, had injured her so much. For there are no bounds to be set either to love, jealousy or hatred in the female mind.
Hannah's course of action was extreme. She disguised herself as a man and assumed the name of her brother-in-law, James Gray.
Having thus ordered my affairs, I cut off my hair and dressed me in a suit of my husband's, having had the precaution to quilt the waistcoat to preserve my breast from hurt, which were not large enough to betray my sex. I went out and bought me a silver-hilted sword and some holland shirts.
The get-up was convincing. As soon as she arrived in Coventry, she was drafted into the army. But after 500 lashes, she deserted and fled to Portsmouth, where she joined the Royal Marines. As her husband was a seafarer, perhaps the intention was to track him down. It was a ship even older than this one that Hannah and her fellow Marines boarded in October 1748. The Swallow set sail from Portsmouth, destined for Lisbon and then India. She can have had no idea about the adventure or the danger that lay ahead of her. The voyage involved inhospitable weather and filthy conditions, disease, brawls and a run-in with an amorous woman in one port who expected to marry James Gray. Hannah had to do a runner on the morning of the nuptials. She worked and drank as hard as any shipmate and may or may not have fought at Pondicherry and been wounded by musket balls in the groin. It's said she dug them out herself to keep the secret of her sex. Her comrades joked about her lack of facial hair. They assumed she was a fresh-faced youth. She didn't find her husband, but apparently learned he'd been hanged for murder in Naples. Landing ashore in London after years of being away, alleys like these would have been seething with sailors, telling tall tales and recounting their exploits. Perhaps none was taller than the one James Gray would tell his shipmates, for in June 1750, in a London tavern, he revealed to his fellow Marines that he was a she.
She's enlisted under fraudulent circumstances, so the usual kind of pension and petitions would have been unheard. So she takes to this career on the stage and the publication of her books and by John Walker to try and to rally up public support for this story of her doing this guise, and it seems to have worked. Even at the time that the story became popular, they're beginning to put it into kind of articles into the press at the time, so it's almost, in a way, it's being leaked out almost. It's
like a serialisation in the newspaper.
Yeah, serialisation. So they're beginning to kind of get the story out. It's got a kind of kudos to it, and anecdotal kind of history. It would attract attention.
Hannah Snell retired to Wapping, where she ran a pub for a few years. Now, accounts differ as to what it was called. It may have been the Female Warrior or the Widow in Masquerade. She pulled pints and told her seafaring tales, and she even wore her Marine's uniform.
She has a pension from the Crown now of £18, 5 shillings per annum, and the liberty of wearing men's clothes and also a cockade in her hat, which she still wears. She has laid in a room with 70 soldiers and not been discovered by any of them.
Over the next 40 years, Hannah Snell married twice and raised 2 sons. Presumably the pension ran out, and in her late 60s, with no one to care for her, Hannah was hospitalised at Bedlam Asylum, where she died in 1792. And it's here at the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, that Hannah Snell's story comes to its conclusion. 42 years after being discharged and being granted her pension, Hannah was laid to rest with the other soldiers here, just as she'd requested.